Welcome to Construction Genius, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Smith Miller, the CEO of Strategic Tax Solutions. Now, Smith, as I introduce you here, some of my audience might start cringing when we use the word tax. I know I always cringe when I think about how much I've got to give Uncle Sam this year. But you have good news for people when it comes to their taxes, specifically to construction companies. So tell us all about that, Smith.
So the R&D tax credits have been around since 1981. Typical contractors and design build contractors and subcontractors don't believe that they qualify, and due to several reasons. One is people conjure up in your head when you say R&D, they think of white coats, bunnies, beakers, and a sterile environment.
So specifically, when we're talking about R&D, we're talking about research and development.
Yes, research and development tax credits.
Okay.
So what this does is offsets, reduces at a federal and state level the tax liabilities for these corporations, and it ultimately flows through to the shareholders or members of that entity.
Okay, so we were talking offline about an example of a general contractor, design build contractor that you have worked with, that you have saved over $500,000 in tax liability. So tell us about that specific contractor.
So that specific contractor is doing both brand new projects from the ground up,
yep,
as well as TI to sometimes newer buildings, sometimes old buildings.
Mm-hmm.
They have to shore it up before they can do the building. So it boils down to a 4-part test. And if you satisfy this 4-part test, which most contractors, general contractors, design build contractors, and subcontractors qualify. And it goes like this: at a high level, you must set out to improve a product or process. It must be technical in nature. There must be uncertainty on the onset, and you must go through an iterative process of trial and error to satisfy that hypothesis or answer your hypothesis and or get to your end result, building the building or putting in an HVAC system that works efficiently, or a structural engineer that's successfully completed a job where they've implemented their structure and it works, or they're done.
Okay, so let's just go through those step by step. This is very important. Number one, they're improving a product or a process. So I'm imagining if I'm doing a TI, there's an existing building, I'm improving that building, and therefore I qualify for that aspect of the tax credit.
That satisfies that.
That satisfies that requirement. And there's 4 requirements that you must satisfy. So the second one is that it is technical in nature. And I know that you were saying when we were chatting earlier that one of the reasons people don't take advantage of the tax credit is because they think of people in lab coats. But what you were saying is that the laboratory that we use is in our computers. Is that correct?
That is correct, especially in the CAD department or drafting department, and with engineers. Okay,
so let's just hit that then. So if someone in your construction company is using a CAD program of some kind, doing some kind of design technical in nature, then that qualifies for that aspect of the tax credit.
That is correct.
Okay, now the third one is, now this is an interesting one, elimination of uncertainty. Yes. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, so every project a contractor, design build contractor, or a subcontractor takes on, there's going to be uncertainty, even if they've done it 1,000,000 times before. There's going to be uncertainty. There is uncertainty with every single project.
So let me interrupt you. Let me see if this is a correct example. So let's say I bid a project and I win that project, and then I give it off to my project manager, and perhaps they do some design engineering or some project engineering on the current designs in order to improve those, in order to be able to build it more efficiently. Is that an example of elimination of uncertainty?
That would be one example of the first. You've just satisfied the first three.
The first three.
Yeah. Well, you've changed a product or process.
Yep.
You're using something technical, and now you're satisfying or looking at or eliminating or reducing the uncertainty.
Okay. So anytime my project manager does some value engineering on a project that I'm working on, then that satisfies those first three requirements in order to qualify for the tax credit.
Yes.
Okay, and then let's talk about the fourth one.
So the process of experimentation. So to get in order for a contractor or general contractor or subcontractor to get to their end result, they're going to go through an iterative process, either of trial and error in the modeling of it. Let's take a subcontractor that's an HVAC. They're going to run.
Hold on just for a second. No, hold on, just before you get into that. So let me take that iterative process. So let's say my project manager has done some value engineering. We take it out to the field. My foreman or my superintendent comes back and says, hey, that's okay, but if we did it this way, it would be even better. And I do a little more work on that design. Would that qualify for the iterative in nature aspect?
Absolutely.
Ah.
Yes. So and what you just played out there happens on a regular basis for every contractor and subcontractor out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, how is it that this tax credit works? What aspect of the tax universe is looked at in terms of the savings? You can tell I'm not a CPA, eh?
So what you're asking, so there's three components that go into making up the amount of the credit?
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
So the three components are the W-2 wages of the individuals that are conducting the qualifying activities, which we just described, satisfying that four-part test.
Right.
The second component would be supplies consumed during the process of, okay? And the third component would be subcontractors or vendors that helped on a project to complete. So a typical design build contractor will hire subcontractors, if you will, or vendors to help them in areas that they have an expertise in. So the client, the general in this scenario, is able to capture 65% of what they pay out to that subcontractor. They capture 65% of that cost goes into the makeup of making the amount of the credit. And the reason it's at 65% is because the subcontractor can also claim the credit.
Okay, so hold on a second. Let's just think about that. So I'm a GC. I've got a project. I sub some of that out to one of my project partners. They do the activities that are surrounding that four-part test, and I get a credit as a result of that, based on what I pay them.
You're eligible for the credit, yes.
You're eligible. Okay, you're eligible. Okay, now let me go back a little bit. You talked about the W-2. Okay, so you and I are both in Northern California. We know that the construction companies pay a lot of money for project managers, estimators, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the tax credit is based on, the qualifying tax credit is based on how much money you're paying those highly paid technical workers. Is that correct?
That is one component. That is the largest component that goes into making up the amount of the credit or the tax savings that the client can benefit from.
Okay, so then if I'm paying my PMs, let's say I'm paying them $100,000 to $200,000 a year. I've got 5 or 6 PMs working in my organization. So, I'm getting up with all the bennies and everything like that. I'm getting close to $1 million easy. And then I think about all the projects that they're working on that qualify under that 4-part test. That's where I can really start hitting some home runs in terms of the tax credits. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there's something that I like to share with contractors because they bid, and subcontractors as well. They bid on hundreds throughout a year. Okay, maybe not hundreds, but some contractors may bid on 100 bids in a year. Okay, either way, there's a lot of bids. There's typically a large number of bids that go out.
Yep.
And they don't win all those bids.
Yes.
So when we go through the education process with the client, all those bids that they do and they don't win, they really do win, because all that 4-part test is being satisfied by the estimators. They're going through that. The engineers and project engineers and estimators are all working together, and the CAD people are all working together to design this product, whatever it is, a building or improving a structure.
So hold on. So I don't even have to get a project in order to benefit from this tax credit.
That is correct. And this is one of the biggest bright spots that contractors love, because they're like, wait a minute, it's not a loss and it's not a loss. That goes toward those monies, those revenues, those W-2 wages that were paid out go towards offsetting their tax liabilities at the federal and state level.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So why is it that contractors don't take advantage of these R&D tax credits?
Well, I can't speak for myself, but I can only speak for what I've been told by my clients. And,
right.
And I have this conversation. So the first thing that I typically hear a lot of is, we didn't think we qualified because we think of R&D, we think of research and development as a sterile, laboratory environment. They don't understand that now, like you pointed out earlier, the laboratory is now in your computer.
That's right.
It's now calculator. It's now. So that's one of them. The other is also they may have done research on the internet, and as you know, there can be misinformation on the internet. And
no, there's misinformation on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
So I think there's a lot of fear that gets conjured up there. And also when you first hear about this, Eric, when I first told you about this, I remember you looking at me like, you're crazy, Smith. This sounds way too good to be true.
Yep.
And that's usually the tip. This sounds too good to be true. And typically, so I think it's a combination. That's what I've been told. It's a combination of the three. So it's an education process.
So do you find that CPAs push back on this a little bit, or are they kind of skeptical as well?
So most CPAs are aware of it. A lot of them don't want to go down the road from a liability standpoint.
Right.
So that's where we come in. We're a value add. This is all we do. We stay in our lane. We don't do any other taxes. There's 2 tax codes, 174 and 41G. We're an inch wide and a mile deep in, and that's all we do, period. And we do it very well.
So what liability do you take on when you work with a client in light of, finding out if they qualify and all those kinds of things? How does that work?
So in our fees, which we typically charge 1/3 of what we generate, we provide our clients with audit defense. So we own this. We own the R&D component of it.
Okay. So in other words, then you have skin in the game as well.
Absolutely. And as of today, and we have never had a disallowance at the federal or state level, and we've been to appeals twice and won. So,
okay, so how many of these have you done over the years?
How many of these audits? How many of these projects?
Yeah, how many of these projects?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. And so you've never lost a. How would you describe that?
We've never had a disallowance. We've never had a disallowance.
Okay, so the feds or the state have never come back to you and said, nope, you can't have this.
Yeah. Well, they've come back and said that, but we fight it and we share our case with them. And that's where the devil is in the details. You have to be able to substantiate it. And that's where we come in. And we document everything that we do to substantiate the claim. Okay.
Now, the reason why I just went into all that detail was not so that, we could just pitch Smith here, but it's so that the audience could understand that there is a safe way of going about this process and potentially saving millions of dollars in terms of your tax liability. So as we think about this here today, Smith, what advice do you have for my audience, whether they're general contractors or subcontractors? What advice do you have? What actions should they take?
Well, I would advise them to reach out to their CPA and have a discussion with them, and or reach out to us. We provide our prospects with a preliminary analysis, which requires us getting some tax returns and gross receipts. We plug it into a model, take a snapshot of the past 3 years, and share that with them. And if they want to engage us, they can engage us. So it's a simple process, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. And it's something that everybody should do to find out, is it bigger than a bread box, or is it smaller than a bread box?
Okay. Just in case you guys heard that, I'm in my home office here recording it, and my kids were making some noise. I'm practicing my parental self-control at the moment. Okay, so this is the key here. You've got to reach out to your CPA, get them involved, and then you've got to reach out to someone who does the kind of work that Smith does. And what Smith does, it's an inch wide and a mile deep. And so I'm going to link to your website in the show notes just so that people see it. And obviously this is we're sharing this information with you guys, not just so that you could go to Smith's website or something like that, but so that you could be aware of this R&D tax credit and understand that as a construction contractor, whether you're a sub or a GC, it could have a massive positive impact on your tax liability and save you a bunch of money. Any closing words that you'd like to leave us here with, Smith?
No, I encourage, like I said, this is an educational process. I encourage everybody to look into it, even if you don't think you qualify. Check it out. It will not be a waste of your time. Even if you don't qualify, it's not a waste of your time.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you joining me here today, Smith. I really appreciate you explaining this. And like I said, I'll leave a link in the show notes to your website. And I appreciate you joining me here today.
Great. Thank you.